Okay, up next, we would like to introduce our featured presenter, Charlie Murphy, a very member of our very own club and very active in the community and serving in her profession as well. Charlie, would you like to come on up, and I'll get your slides on here for you. One moment.
Yep. So I go by Charlie, and only, let's see, maybe a judge and my boss and the chief of police call me Crystal. So if you see that, it's confusing. My friends and family call me Charlie. So I work at the Arcata Police Department. I'm a juvenile diversion counselor. So it was really interesting. I never planned on working with kids, ever. I was an ornery kid. So yeah, kids are really unattractive to me, I thought. So I graduated from Chico State University as a psychology major. I wanted to be a researcher and professor. And when I was looking for jobs here, of course, the jobs I found were like after school program, an aide for third grade and kindergarten and things like that. And then another job I found was like, a drug and behavior rehab center for at-risk youth. I was like, I probably do that for a little bit. What that turned out to be, I went through the background checks, I went through everything. And what that turned out to be was Juvenile Hall and their respective drug and behavior rehab center, called the Regional Center. I was like, all right, I'll do this for a couple of years, and then I'm going to move away. I'm going to go to grad school. I was there for 7 years, so that was cool. 7 years, and I ended up going to HSU and getting a degree in developmental psychopathology, and consequently just fell in love with the kids in Juvenile Hall. It was just, we have these kids who can't, read a clock. Kids who, like, they're 16, they don't know the difference between an M and a W, and their last name starts with a W. Probably cry, but that's okay. My therapist says it's good. So, it's like, I essentially, the more I learned that what you expect from people is what you get from them. So if you expect the best, that's what you get. I was always in trouble. If you guys have met my dog Cheese, he's been in Juvenile Hall. So kids used to be on isolation, and I was like, that's crazy. Isolation, kids are in Juvenile Hall for 3 to 6 months. And there's like, some kids don't have family visit. They can't touch each other. They can't touch staff. And I was just like, imagine going 6 months without physical touch. So, I would sneak cheese in for these kids on isolation. I'd sneak toys in. I was called an insubordinate because I would be like, hey, I'm going to bring a kite in. And my supervisor would say, you can't do that. It's a safety hazard. Blah, blah. I was like, oh yeah, I already talked to Tim Tosti. Sorry, it's approved. And so, I got some bad reviews. But ultimately, the more you treat them like kids, the more they acted like kids. So I had a good friend when I worked there, and he said, you should apply for your master's. What are you doing here? And I was just like, I'll do it eventually. And he's like, no, like, do it. So I applied for Humboldt State, and I, again, still thinking that I was going to be, a researcher. And by the end of it, my mind had changed. And I just saw professors at HSU that were really drained and not happy necessarily at that time. And so I was like, I can't be one of these people when I grow up. This is awful. And so I got my degree, and I didn't know what I was doing. Lo and behold, there was a newspaper article, and it's like, keep kids out of juvenile hall, keep kids in school. And I was like, yeah, obviously. And through my work, I just developed skills and rapport, and I also have quite a bit of life experience that was similar to the kids in juvenile hall. With as far as my, I grew up locally, so we had addiction in my family. I had experienced homelessness throughout high school. And so yeah, I had kids that were like, you don't know anything about me. I'm like, yeah, I kind of know a little bit, like smidge. And so I think it made my work, or me working with them, I was relatable. I wasn't just like this ephemeral adult that knew everything. And I was like, hey, like, you know, so I essentially just fell into this calling. So I applied for this job in 2016. They wanted not a research degree, they wanted a counseling degree, an LCSW or MFT. And I was like, well, I don't have one of those, but it was 2016, elections were going on. And I was like, what better time than to apply for a job you're not qualified for? Just kidding. Not a political joke, just a joke I love to say. I'm sorry. Totally kidding. I have no political alliances. So yeah, but anyways, I landed the job. I sent an email to the chief of police being like, hey, I know I don't have the right degree. I grew up here. I understand the kids. I understand the community. Give me a chance. I emailed the person who had my job before me. I emailed anyone I could. And the chief of police was like, yeah, there was someone, you know, quote unquote, on paper more qualified, but keep sending those emails. And I was like, awesome. So essentially what happened was the program was developed. I went in there with my research background. And I was like, I have everything. Like, I've done this research and that research. And my uncle's like, whoa, try a little humility. You know, go in there, listen, ask them what they want. And the chief goes, this is your program, build it. So it actually worked out very well for me. So the program, the primary objectives are using evidence-based practices to reduce, you know, juvenile justice system and also keep kids in school, providing youth and parents with support systems. And this is primarily because when we look at kids in the community who aren't going to school, who are committing crimes, who are you know, maybe on a wrong path, schools turn to the parents and say, why isn't your kid coming to school? And parents turn to the school and say, how come my kids are failing your class? And then they both look at law enforcement and say, what, like, and so obviously there's like something, there's like a missing link here where they're not working together. So this program really provides support for school, law enforcement, and families, and it happens on all those different levels. So parents will get parenting classes, kids will get counseling and mentorship, and just building that bridge between community members. How the program works, schools is first there's a referral, and this can come through law enforcement, so the sheriff's office, Arcata PD, anyone, and then there is an assessment with the youth and their guardian, and it's important to use guardian when we talk about families, because a lot of people, especially in our community, aren't living with their bio families or parents. They might be living with their grandparents, aunts, and uncles, and so that's like a more inclusive word that you can use when referring to a kid. And then we also follow up with a one-on-one assessment with the kid. We create a contract, and then provide case management, and then what happens from there is either the kid completes the program, doesn't complete the program, or reoffends. So just like the law enforcement citation or referral process, again, we have a student attendance review team called the SAT. There's a sheriff's office, Humboldt State Police, Arcata Police, Child Welfare, and DHHS often refer kids to us. And our target population is first-time offenders with misdemeanors. So this might be assaulting somebody on campus or in the community. This might be possessions of drug or alcohol in the community or on campus, selling drugs or and alcohol. Truancy has been a huge one, especially with the pandemic. One of the risks that we try to address is there is a widening in the net. Obviously, if kids are having more statistically, what they said in the past is if kids have the more contact that kids have with law enforcement, the more likely they're going to be involved in the system. And so we have to be aware of that as an agency, that that's not what we're doing, that we're providing support, and it's not, streamlining them or doing the, the school to prison pipeline. So after referrals, again, the family assessment, we'll bring the kids in and we'll say, what school do you go? What are your grades? What teachers do you like? What teachers don't you like? Do you have any friends? What are they like? What are their hobbies? What do you guys do together? How's your mental health? What's your substance use like? And we can do an assessment, whether that's recreational or somewhat problematic or addictive. What's your family like? Family history. We talk about ACEs, which is the Adverse Childhood Experiences questionnaire. So there are 10 things that kids can experience that make them more likely to either commit crime, have health issues, have substance abuse issues. And so we address kind of that. And we also do like a resiliency questionnaire. What strengths do you have? Do you have a mentor? Do you have a supportive person? What are your hobbies? What are your friends? And to focus not only on risk factors, but protective factors. And then, so trauma and then leisure and recreation. I think that's one of the harder ones for our kids in our community is, what do you do for fun? I thought moving to Arcata, I was like, okay, I'm going to start this program. I'm going to get kids involved in like recreational things and I found not a lot for kids who aren't in organized sports. And so that's definitely been something that I've watched develop over the years. But so the contract and case plan, each kid's case plan will look different depending on the kid. So we might have two different kids who shoplift from Safeway, and one kid's just like, an all-star student, and he was like, I don't know, my friend told me to do it, so I did it, and I'm really sorry, I didn't mean to, and it was dumb. And I'm like, okay, so that kid might still have community service, and he might have some other things like for accountability, and he'll have to pay back the store. The other kid, another kid might go in there and she says like, oh yeah, I stole the bottle, and like, I don't care, I do it all the time. It's a big organization, it's Safeway, who cares? And so they might need a little bit more support as far as like, what is accountability? What kind of harm have you done to yourself, to your family, to the store, to your community when you have that attitude? Also, they might have like a substance abuse thing. So they might get something called brief interventions, where we talk to kids about what does your substance use look like? Why do you use substances? Because people use substances for all different reasons. It might be like boredom. It might be for anxiety, depression, because I can't sleep. And to me, I tell kids like, that's like a nail, an attack, and a staple. And weed or alcohol might be your rock. It might do the job, but it's not the right tool. And so let's talk about the other tools that you've forgotten about, or build your toolbox when it comes to that kind of stuff. What else can you do when you're bored? What else can you do when you're anxious? What else can you, and then the community service also looks different depending on age. And if you're failing math class, your community service is going to be meeting with your math teacher. If you're kind of 16, 17, spinning your wheels, your community service is going to look like going to a job coach for a few times and getting those skills and interview skills. Community partners. And then one of my favorite things we do is the parent project. This is a class that some of our members in this club have taken. I recommend it to anyone. I call it Humaning 101. A lot of the skills that we have as parents, we're just gleaning off TV or gleaning off like our own experiences. And so this is actually like a concrete thing for parents with kids who might be at risk or strong-willed, showing appropriate displays of love and affection, support, consequences. Also, this was something I saw in juvenile hall, where parents who would come and visit their children, they'd have a one-on-one conversation, and then they'd all walk out single file. Like, you guys have so much in common. Like, and you guys are sitting here listening to your kids talk and be locked up, and you think there's something wrong with me, there's something wrong with my kid, and you're just in like your little echo chamber. And so this is also a great way that parents find support, and they see that people from all backgrounds, walks of life, also have the same problems. And so it's an interesting thing to build skills within the parents, and that also has a ripple effect on the kids. So yeah, just an example. So the first unit is the displays of love and affection, and then the difference between influence and control, letting parents know you can't control your kid. If you could, we wouldn't have teen pregnancies and addiction, and they wouldn't be cutting school. I wouldn't have a job. So what does influence look like? Positive and negative consequences, and having like steps of success, which is our weekly homework that we do with parents. We'll give them an assignment every week, whether it's like, hey, tell your kid you love them every day this week, or catch them doing something right, because our kids who are in trouble most often, they only hear when they're doing bad. And so even if they're trying, they're like, my parents never recognize when I do something good, they only recognize when I do something wrong. And so getting parents in the habit and also creating positive reinforcement both ways. So yeah, that's a really, we're actually, our last class of this series is next Tuesday. So yeah, Loving Solutions is for parents of kids between 5 and 10. And then the parent project is for strong-willed kids 11 and up, or parents of strong-willed kids. And we also provide childcare and dinners to try to eliminate a lot of barriers for families in the community. So measuring success. So the year the APD was funded, diversion, 89% of the juvenile cases were referred to probation. During the first year measures he was funded, the number dropped to 41%, and the remaining 49% were handled with an APD. The past year, usually it's about 100 kids a year, but with COVID and everything going on, we had different things coming up as far as what does truancy look like when you're doing online school. And then a lot of things that were not in diversions, like, where we mostly get school referrals. Now we're getting parents calling and being like, my kid is home all the time, and I'm not a teacher, and I have a full-time job, and I have my own personal, life, things going on. How do I do this? And kids are really struggling in a different way. So our records showed 95% success for kids who are in the program. And so that means they completed their community service. They did counseling. They've done their restorative practices. They've made amends with people they've harmed, and other things like that. Failure is usually due to the kids aren't, they're not participating at all. And one of the things that we do to reduce that whole widening the net in the PASS's model for restorative practices, restorative justice has been, this is your one get out of jail free card. If you mess this up, we're sending you to probation. I don't believe that. I'm still making mistakes, and I'm 36. So I feel like that's a pretty tough challenge. It's important to see that kids' development, and we all do this and this. And so when a kid fails, you're okay, like, you messed up again. Like, are we gonna get you back on the right track? Like, what are your decisions in doing stuff like that? So that's a little bit something that we have that's different in our model. But it's not a one strike, you're out and tough luck. I have a colleague named Leah Valdivia. She's wonderful. She's especially great with the 5 to 10-year-olds. I really like working with the teenagers because I'm kind of a ornery teenager. So I'm also an artist, and I really like integrating art into everything I do. So it might be working with a kid one-on-one. I have worked with Interact, decorating their bathrooms. It's one of my favorite projects. The school had a bathroom that was being vandalized often, where the kids were peeling paint off, and we were like, well, let's paint it. And the kids picked their images and inspirational quotes, and the janitor staff says, like, can you do that to every bathroom? Like, there's almost been no destruction in that bathroom. And so now that was the worst bathroom, and now there's an upstairs bathroom, it's the worst bathroom. That's our next one. And we've started painting all the bathrooms in Arcata High, and it gives the kids ownership and pride and inspiration to their school. And then I'll do some art therapy with kids one-on-one. But yeah, essentially the job is my dream job. I get to work with lovely people such as yourself. I joined Rotary thinking, oh, it's just a bunch of rich business owners and I'm going to trick them into helping people. I didn't know that was the whole point of this. So, to my pleasant surprise. I guess I'm just open for questions if we have time. I don't know how long.
So this is just for City of Arcata, essentially.
Actually, no. So I have an office at McKinleyville High and Arcata High, and we work with the feeder schools as well as the middle schools as far north as Trinidad and as far east as Blue Lake.
Now, what do they do in Fortuna? Do they have someone like in Fortuna doing this job? Or?
They don't. They have an SRO, so a school resource officer. I think it's still kind of a new model. I think that the county is probably in a pretty big place to reassess things, especially as decriminalization continues and they don't want kids in systems. That's changed quite a bit. I saw a lot of kids come into juvenile hall for shoplifting, and then because it's a revolving door, leave with face tattoos and addiction. So that's changed, which is good, but we still need support for the kids out in the community and the families out in the community. And I'm hoping that restorative practices and restorative justice and diversion programs expand in our community.
So in your initial contact, Charlie, with the students, kids, how do you get them involved? How do you get them, that's got to be a big task. I mean, just trying to feel them out and have them respond to it.
Yeah, it's always different. I have kids who meet me and they're just scared and wide-eyed, and I'm like, okay, this is gonna be a cakewalk. It never is, but it's or rarely is what I should say. And then I have some kids who just are like, you're not the boss of me, you don't know me, leave me alone. And they'll see me on their campus like, that's my probation officer. And they're like kind of using me as social clout. And I'm like, I'm not your probation officer. I'm actually your counselor. You want to tell your friends you got a counselor? That's my guess. But yeah, no, it's always just meeting them where they're at and saying, I'm not your probation officer. I'm not a part of your consequences. Like I don't have the same goals as your school has. I don't have the same goals as your parents have. I'm your neutral person. If anything, I'm your employee and you have to tell me your goals and we'll start from there.
Cool.
Hi. If you had a wish list, what do you need from the community? What do you need from people who can help you? What are you asking? Is there anything?
I think that it would just be somehow advocating for more. I would like to spread this. Ideally, in a perfect world, I'd love to spread this and have more of the trainings and the toolkit that I have and Leah has put into our probation or put into with hands of families. Essentially, yeah, because we do a lot. We do mindfulness with the kids. We do community resilience trainings with parents and teachers and first responders. But we're two people for all Northern Humboldt. So I just think that just more people who are interested in this kind of work.
You bring that up. What is the ratio of your two against how many kids?
A lot. A lot. So let's see. There's, our caseload waxes and wanes all the time. It's feast or famine. I'll be bored to the gills someday and be like, I need to create work. I need to do a training and do this and that. And then what happens is there's a landslide and I go, oh, great. I have all the work I created and this work. And so it's hard. But as far as kids, there are roughly 500 kids at Arcata High and 1,000 kids at McKinleyville High, and that's 2 schools out of all the districts.
Charlie, you mentioned boredom as one of the factors for potentially, self-medicating or other things that lead to this. I've only never entered this system because I was never caught, but yeah,
That's
boarding
what I
was
said.
definitely a destructive factor. What community resources do you see that are needed outside of what you mentioned, organized sports, that are things that these kids could be able to participate in if they were available?
Yeah, I'm, well, me being me, I'm thinking like art projects. I think that everybody's an artist. I really do. And just because you haven't found your medium, or it's not what you think art is. If someone's like, I'm not an artist, but I love to cook. I'm like, how is that not art? Like, I'm not an artist, but I love to garden. Like, that is art. I hate gardening. Like, it is a science, if anything. So, I think that there are different programs, and I thought moving to Arcata that I'd be like, yeah, I'm gonna get these like more introverted kids plugged into these art programs or music programs, and there really isn't anything for kids who don't have an outlet. I think information regarding like what resources there are, like Ink People and Mars Project, or even, there's things like the city has art things, but a lot of families can't afford even the subsidized, the fees. I remember taking a kid to farmer's market, and I was taking him to his community service, and we're walking around the plaza. Because we couldn't find it, whatever. And so I was like, all right, we're gonna walk around. We're just gonna spend some time together. We're walking around farmer's market, which happens every Saturday, and he's playing with beans. He's 13. He's like above playing with beans, but he's fascinated by the colors and the people and everything. And he goes, "This happens every Saturday?" And I was like, "Yeah, you've never been to farmer's market?" And he's like, "No." He lives about 4 blocks from the plaza.
I just wanted to say thank you, because Charlie helped us with one of our sons. And when you say widening net about like catching the kids, right? There's too many points of contact. I actually always confuse it with the opposite.
Yeah.
Because it's so interesting to all of a sudden enter this abyss. And as a parent, you're scared, right? And so I think I had one of my least favorite moments of myself actually in Charlie's office with our son and my husband, and you're just amazing. So thank you for all that you do. The parent project's amazing too. And you just really get a glimpse of all the humans that we're in this world with. And so thank you for being one of them.
Randy, you had a question too.
Well, I just wanted to just say how proud I am to see how Charlie has kept her passion, and how strong this program is remaining. It's been in place since 1980. It started with a state grant, and Lil Benavides Stoddard was the original person that put it together, and it has remained. The low recidivism rates have always been there, and it's been a real struggle to keep it going over the years. But this is really something that the Budget Act has never gone to, and because it's one of the things that makes Arcata, it's always been identified as this program as one of the things that makes Arcata unique, and one of the great things about Arcata. And I just love seeing Charlie keeping it as strong as ever. So thank you, Charlie. You're doing an awesome job.
Hey, Ian, you're muted.
We've lost your sound. Ian.
Thank you. How's that? Well, you lost me entirely for a moment there. Sorry. So thank you for all you do. We appreciate it. Let's see if I can.
We have another question here from Greg, has his hand up.
Please.
One of the projects we supported many years ago, and I was actually helped form it into a nonprofit. The president was Tiffany's Garden for Children, that many of you might remember. Carol Hayslip ran right off the plaza, and one of the reasons I really was a supporter, it was a place where kids who had nowhere else to go, or did but chose to come here, could just go and hang out. And we had video games and art, and they can get free food, and Carol would help them, and we could link them up with Jim Reese, who was the juvenile diversion person at APD. And unfortunately, it closed. And I don't think there's another facility like that. And this was, it was started right on the plaza, and then we moved just off the plaza. Anyway, I bring that up because we do a terrible job, as Charlie noted, that, we have a lot of organized sports, but we don't have any place where kids can just go and hang out and be safe. And I'm hopeful that maybe we can try to revive something like that somewhere, and not just sort of toss them out in the streets.
Yeah, and one of the things that brings up was like, so the business, I think it was like Arcata. I was like, oh, cool, like an arcade for kids, like that's somewhere for kids to hang out. It was a 21 and up business, or it is a 21 and up business. So I think just being aware of making things inclusive for kids who might not have opportunities to flip. That's just a bad business model. Who doesn't want quarters for kids? Yeah, just be mindful of what spaces you have.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.